Hello, everyone. As Abraham just said, the last event of this day is a roundtable with editors. For that, we will have some editors of different journals related to cheminformatics. And we have as the members of this roundtable Dr. Karina Martinez from Institute of Chemistry at UNAM, Dr. Rajarshi Guha from Vertex Pharmaceuticals, Dr. José Medina Franco from School of Chemistry, Dr. Alexander Tropsha from the University of North Carolina, Dr. Matthias Rarey, who already gave a talk earlier today, and Dr. Zdrazil from the European Molecular Laboratory. To start this roundtable, please introduce yourself and mainly your role as editors. So if it's okay with you, we will start with Dr. Karina Martinez.
Hi, good morning to everyone and good afternoon for some of you. So it's very nice to see you all here. So I'm Karina Martinez. I'm associate editor in the Journal of Cheminformatics and also in the Springer Nature Applied Sciences. So it's very nice for me to share with you some of the things that I've learned from this role. Thank you.
Okay, can we continue with Rajarshi Guha, please?
Hi, I'm Rajarshi Guha. I'm a co-editor-in-chief of the Journal of Chemical Information, Journal of Cheminformatics, and have been in this role, I think, for 5 years now. And looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you. Dr. Medina Franco.
Thank you. So hi, I'm José Medina from the School of Chemistry at UNAM. So I'm part of the editorial board of Journal of Cheminformatics and JCIM. I'm also serve as specialty chief editor of the in silico methods and artificial intelligence in the Journal of Frontiers in Drug Discovery. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Dr. Tropsha.
Hi, I'm Alex Tropsha. I'm at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and I am on the editorial boards of all journals in cheminformatics.
Thank you. Dr. Zdrazil.
Hi, my name is Barbara Zdrazil. I'm working in Cambridge at the European Bioinformatics Institute, where I'm coordinating the campus. And I'm a co-editor-in-chief of the Journal of Cheminformatics. Yeah, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And finally, Dr. Rarey.
Yeah, hello. You heard me speaking earlier, so I don't have to say much in the moment. So I basically am I'm editor at the Journal of Chemical Information and Modeling, and I'm doing this now for approximately 9 years.
Thank you very much. As you may know, most of the audience are students who are working in the cheminformatics field. So they are totally interested in publishing their research work in scientific journals. So the first topic at this roundtable will be do's and don'ts when writing a paper. So, Dr. Guha, what can you say about this?
Sure. So I guess there's a number of ways you can I guess tackle that question. One part of it is in terms of how a paper might be written. And then the other part of it, I think, is also related to what is in the paper. So for example, I think one thing that certainly helps editors sort of decide whether a paper should be considered to be sent out for review is to make sure that there is a novel, well, I won't say novel, but a contribution in that paper. It's very important to make it clear in both your abstract and how you write it that there was a problem that you identified and you have come up with a solution to that problem, and it builds on previous work. I think one of the challenges we face, and I think this is true in a lot of academic publishing, is that it's very easy to make small incremental changes, which is perfectly fine, I think. Everything does not have to be, like breakthrough science. There is lots of utility in incremental improvements, but it does need to be made very clear so that it's easy for both the editors and then in the end the readers to know that this is the contribution you have made that moves that problem or moves that field a little forward.
Someone would like to contribute to this comment? Or who has a different opinion about that?
Yeah. Well, I just would like to say that following up Raj's comment is like do a couple of important things. Pay attention to the main goal of your paper and organize the manuscript. Basically plan an outline before writing in full.
I'll add. People need to decide on the format of the paper and read the journal guidelines. Read the manual. That's probably the first thing one should do. Incremental contribution should not be over your previous contribution, your own. So people must know what's published in the literature and do the environmental scan of what they contribute on top of what Rajarshi was saying. What they contribute to the field, not to their own evolution. The amount of increment determines the selection of the journal you want to go to, and you want to have a good sense of whether the paper is likely or unlikely to be considered by a particular journal. So it's really very important to be aligned with the journal content and with the journal level. And it's very helpful to think about who can review this paper. You are advised typically to nominate reviewers, and if you think that top people in the field will like your paper, go for the best journal you can.
So maybe sorry, Karina.
No, go ahead, Barbara.
So I wanted to extend a little bit on what was said about read journal guidelines structure. So in general, if you're kind of a beginner in writing, I think you should read a lot of articles that will really help you to see what the structure should be like, right? And then also I feel like it's very important to have a simple, clear language as well, right? Because not only readers, but also reviewers don't want to spend a lot of time just to be able to understand what you have been writing. And that's also true for all the figures, the graphics, visuals that you have put in your manuscript. So those should really support your main message, and also make sure that these are easily readable, that X's are labeled, the legend explains exactly what is in the graphics and so on. So that's just my comment on formats. And I think that's really important because we all don't want to spend unnecessary time to just be able to understand what actually is the message. So bring your message out in a simple and clear way.
So
yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't want to add much here. So I think for most of us in this community, I think it's important to see that there are basically two types of manuscripts. You can either be somebody who is applying cheminformatics or modeling techniques, and or you belong to the portion of people who are developing things. And so the manuscripts you write are differing whether you're in the one or the other regime. And it's very important to think about this first, yeah, especially if you're in the application area. So I think we see a lot of things which are not accepted there because the method are, if the methods are too standard, so if these are standard software packages which are applied, to a classical problem. And then in addition, there is no experimental validation at the end. This is usually extremely difficult to get a publication in there. Yeah, so that's something one really has to keep in mind. If one has a new method, so one is in the other category. And in this other category, it's very important to compare yourself against the state of the art. But this was basically said. So you should not only describe in the introduction what's the state of the art, what's your contribution, but if you then present a new method, you should also be actually comparing yourself against the state of the art to see where the benefits are of your methods. I think this is beside what was already said about the structure and the clear wording and the good pictures and images, I think the most important way to guide through the system.
Well, I guess most of it has been said. Just to emphasize about this going to the point on the papers, like focusing on the main idea and build upon that, because I think that probably maybe is cultural, but we are typically very wordy in Mexico or Latin America in general. So it's important to keep focus on the main topic, on the main idea, and not elaborate too much because it's easy to get lost. So that would be my general thing. And also regarding the sort of the ethics, because for some people, something cannot be like unethical, like for example, like reusing the information or doing stuff. So sometimes it's just cultural, and we just need to know exactly what's allowed and what is not.
Thank you very much.
Can I make one more comment? Because I think Matthias raised a really good point, and given that today's meeting and tomorrow's meeting is essentially about computational topics, if you are developing methods, and as Matthias said, you should be comparing to state of the art. And I think when you go along that path, you want to make use of statistics and you want to make use of them properly. So when you're doing, there's already a number of publications in the field on how to do benchmarking properly and how to report statistics properly. And I think that's something that it's definitely improved over the years within the field, but is still something to keep in mind that because we aren't running lab experiments, that doesn't mean we shouldn't get by with poor statistics. We still want to verify that if you are claiming that your method is an improvement, that it is actually an improvement, and that's where the statistics help.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to elaborate a bit more about one of the points you mentioned. That is one of the advices to younger people is to read the guidelines of the journals. So is this the only help one can get to publish an article, or where can we get help or orientation to publish our work? So I know that Dr. Rarey has to leave early, so let's start with him this time.
Yeah, so one should be aware that the first impression is very important. So I know for ACS journals, and probably that's also the case for others, that there's a kind of a first pass, yeah, which you have to pass actually with your manuscript. And there, the wording, etc., is very important. So if you are a non-native speaker, as I am and many in this round, yeah, please pay special attention to the language. Even if you think, oh, I'm speaking so much English, you are not as good as a classical person who learned English from the very first days on. And so what I really would recommend is search a colleague or a friend which is a native speaker, and let this person give you an impression about the language. If you have no connections in this direction, there are actually professional language services which can help also, but of course they are not for free. Yeah, then you probably have to pay for it. So look for the community and look for friends who might be able to help you with this. So that's actually to pass the first hurdle, and then put special attention to the abstract. I think most of the editors-in-chief who make the first pass will not go to the details of the results. Yeah, if they don't get the message by reading the abstract, they will not probably not let the paper go through. Or so these are probably a few things which you can consider at the very beginning.
I guess one opportunity as well is that if you have gone through the journal guidelines and still are unsure of whether the journal is the proper venue, is to essentially reach out to the editors and send an email, provide the manuscript that you've written, and just ask, is this something that's within the scope, or do you think it's suitable to move forward? That can certainly save a lot of time.
And I think another important consideration is you should consider whom do you want to read your paper, right? So don't only go for journal impact factors or citations. Like if you need to know which community you want to read your paper, right? And then select probably a journal. And then you can look for guidance, like ask your supervisor, reach out to your network. Also what Matthias said about proofreading, right? Let a friend, a colleague read your paper and also give you advice about which journal to target, probably. And also what was said about the abstract, I think is very important and relates to what is your contribution? What are your advancements? So this should already be stated in the abstract. And as Matthias said, this is what we read first, the editors, right? And also what the reviewers will read first. So if your message is very clear in the abstract, you will likely pass this first step.
Many journals must suggest a cover letter, which editors do read first, and that should state and answer these questions of why you're submitting to this journal and why you think your paper worth it. In my group, we often use, especially if it's a relatively new field for us, a online service that's called Jane. I know how many people use it, but that allows you to put in the abstract and the title of the paper, and it gives you the suggested list of journals where you could go. I'm putting this in the chat in case people don't use it and or don't know about it. And then it's useful to look at the references for your own paper and look at the journals where most of your citations come from. And that's helpful. JChem used to have a formal reject. If there are no papers cited from this journal, then most likely it's not in the field. I think then we've gone away with it, but it's still a useful metric.
Yeah, I'll second the use of Jane. It's a very handy utility to at least get a starting point for valid journals.
So I think a little bit more on what Matthias was saying about getting some help. I know that there are some tools on the internet, like there is one called AuthorAid, that is actually a community where you can put your paper or ask someone in your field that is in another country that can help you to even just read your paper and see if it makes sense or have some help. So we can put that also on the website, or also I will put it here on the chat. And there are also other website called Academic Phrase Bank, which is also nice. I mean, it's not like it's gonna solve your English, but it really helps to have some ideas.
So, well, my 2 cents, in addition to what has been said, it's to approach to people that has just recently or previously published in a journal that you are targeting, because that can give you additional feedback. that maybe is not totally clear in the author guidelines, or can give you some specific like tips or advice in their experience. I think that's useful.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have some questions from the audience. I was wondering if you would like to elaborate on some of them. Particularly, I'm seeing that there is a lot of interest from people who is starting in the field, and they are asking for guidance for those who are beginners. Where to start to learn to the field? And the second question is, well, I will read it. To those of us from areas other than bioinformatics, but who are learning to study our molecules from this angle and obtain results from predictive programs, is our information valid for publication, even if we are not experts in the field? What can you say about it?
I mean,
I could give a quick, well, Rajarshi.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll give a very quick answer. So there are tons of stuff on the web. There are as many news as there are fake news. Maybe the latter is more prevalent. So if you just use something from the web and make predictions about molecules, it's worth almost nothing. So if you're not in the field and make predictions, that's fine, but it's on you to test these predictions before even trying to publicize. That's a very simple answer. I'm not even going into comparing or validating or estimating whether it's a good software or bad. It's just when you use it, sort of back to what I think Matthias was saying. If you're a user, then you have to validate.
Yeah, just extending on that comment, I think it's perfectly fine to be an expert in one field and have an interest in another field and then try to do work in that field and then publish it. But as Alex said, you have to develop that expertise in this new field with these new tools that you want to use. Because what will happen is if you don't, and you just download something and run it, that will come out in the paper that you write and submit. And it's very clear when people sort of just download something, press the button and report a table. And that basically will not fly. And so I think as tough as it is, if you do want to come into a new field, you do have to put in that work to develop some level of expertise.
So if you're close to machine learning applications, and it basically sounds like that in this question, I think that one of the really important issues here is that you always should think about your null model. So always think about what is already possible with a very basic, simple approach. Rather than just running a very complex machine learning approach and be happy about something you get out. And always look at the statistics. So Rasha already said this, that statistical tools are there. We see a lot of manuscripts where the people basically say, hey, look at these 5 molecules. We predicted that they are like this or that. Yeah, but this doesn't say anything about the computational method. Yeah, so because you can run it on thousands of molecules, and as long as you don't know what your false positive and false negative rates are, you have no information about how well the method really works. So that would be, I think, more important than you could really make, I think, very good discoveries, even if you are not exactly from this field. Yeah, I think that you shouldn't be discouraged for saying, hey, I'm not a super duper expert in cheminformatics or so, but you should be aware of that you do the right statistical validations to be really convincing related to your results.
To elaborate more to this question, Dr. Zdrazil?
I was muted. I think everything was said already, basically, so can't really add much to that. I second what was said.
I would like to remember to the audience that if you have more questions, please post them on the Q&A section, and we will ask them to the editors. This is a great opportunity, so don't miss it. And we can continue with the topics to discuss. Let's talk about hypes and winters. Where is the cheminformatics field standing, and where are we going? So, Dr. Martinez, would you like to start?
Well, I was about to, but I think there are more senior people in this panel to start that point, I think.
Can I share a screen?
Sure.
Of course.
I don't know how many people had seen this. I'll put this in the presentation mode. But I think that this slide, this is from Gartner, answers the question, or at least where we would like it to be. That's the original slide about the hype cycle for artificial intelligence. And I enriched it in a recent presentation with sort of my sense of where we are in areas related to drug discovery. So we could just talk over it, but I think we're beginning to reach the plateau of productivity. We're over this peak of inflated expectations, and I think it's beginning to be reflected in recent publications that talk about over-promised hype of deep learning as applied to molecular modeling. So I think people are beginning to publish more realistic papers. So that's where I think we're.
So I do have one comment on that. I mean, I agree with the comment about deep learning. I do think if people are looking at deep learning as the next step beyond random forests for regression analyses, that's a dead end. It's the return on investment for those types of studies is just not worth it. I think my favorite point in Alex's figure was intelligent applications. And my view on this is a little now colored because I work in industry now. And I see that a 5% improvement in your RMSE or AUC doesn't matter. If the chemist cannot make use or take action on that prediction. So in some cases, interpretability might play a role in that. But in fact, I would say making use of AI or machine learning coupled with chemical structure to influence a chemist as they design a molecule is, I think, the future. And how that influence is done can be done in many ways. It could be via predictions, but it could also be part of like the user interface in which a chemist is designing molecules. Can you smartly recommend something to do based on what they're doing? Which I think actually broadens the scope of cheminformatics and the type of work that we could do with chemical data sets. But I think we want to go beyond regression and classification.
I would like to make a point about data labeling and data annotation, and I was really happy to see that. So I was expecting that, and I really second what Rajarshi is saying. It's like now we're at the stage where we more and more recognize we can only make good, the predictions are as good as our data is, right? So we had heard a talk about large chemical space and so on. So we're just beginning to explore that, right? But it's not only the vast chemical space, it's also how good is the quality of the data. So I'm really happy to be part of that now by working for Campbell, but I think we can do much better and by exploring all these possibilities to provide more and better, higher quality data in a fair way, we will make better in the future. So that's just the basis for making predictions.
So yeah, so probably I just should add that maybe from the academia where I work, sometimes we are very driven by how many papers you have or where you are putting those papers. But I think that maybe instead of going through like push by fashion, as a paper that we wrote with Jose about that, just to move by putting your ideas and having some contribution rather than just something that is like in the hype. Although it's also good to welcome new technologies and new algorithms and see how it can be used, but just because it's useful, not because it's just in fashion.
From Medina, something to say about?
Yeah, actually, I don't have any other thing to add to what has been already like mentioned.
Thank you very much. Well, if you let me, we can continue with some questions from the audience. I found some that are really interesting. Sergio Ernesto Hernandez asked, what do you think about the fact that the author names, and therefore their prestige, bias the acceptance rate of scientific papers? Do you think it would be better if papers were submitted anonymously? What's your opinion about it?
I have my personal, highly unbiased, because every personal opinion by default is unbiased, comment. I really think we could discuss that forever. The reality is that I think for young people, it's the wrong question to ask. The question that you should ask yourself is, what do you do to become famous and win a Nobel Prize? What happens with people who already won Nobel Prize? It could be biased or not. Good editors pay no attention to, and reviewers to author's name. In fact, I've seen reviews where the fact that someone is famous ignites the reviewer to criticize even stronger. The reality is, think about why these people became famous. And maybe it's the quality of the paper behind. It's very hard to separate. It's the quality of writing behind it, addressing all the questions that we discussed that make the paper acceptable. The author name goes with it. But again, my strong encouragement is change the question. Ask yourself, what can you do to get into that category?
Great answer.
That's my unbiased.
I completely second Alex's opinion. Now maybe having two votes for that makes it biased. But I mean, theoretically, I mean, I've read that paper, and you can do statistics to sort of draw correlations, but it's not causation, or it doesn't show causation in that paper, at least. And the fact is that cheminformatics is not a huge community. Even if things are double-blinded, it's usually not that difficult to work out where the work is coming from. And so, like Alex said, rather than spending your brain cycles on worrying about the name or will I be recognized or not, just make sure that the paper is worthy of publication. And if you do that enough times, then you become famous, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Great advice. Someone else?
I just give my vote to both comments.
Great. Okay, so let's move to the next questions. This is a bit different. Mohamed Ab El Alem asked, in the context of research, what can independent research do with the aim of journal fees or research that doesn't funded by any institute? So what do you think about the fees that are increasingly common in most journals?
I think some journals waive fees if you ask, and if the paper is good. There is still plenty of journals that publish for free. You just give up copyright. So I don't think there is a huge problem with this. And then there is always archive, which in the modern world is totally fine.
And I will say, oh, go ahead.
So yeah, it's true. There are waivers, so you can reach out to the editors and ask, but the number is limited. And on the other hand, you can't really do research without funding, right? So at some point you have to ask yourself where to get the funding from, and then you will be also able to pay the APC. But yeah, it's true. Some journals ask for very high APCs. So then probably you have to avoid those, but still you need funding anyways. So I don't see this as a big problem, but ask for a waiver in case you're in such a situation.
If not, I think related to this question is, I think that one of the bigger reasons for these waivers and fees on the journals is to make all the data available. I mean, make the articles open to all the public. So in that sense, what do you think about open data and open source? Is it necessary?
Yes. That's a short answer. But more seriously, I think, yes, it is necessary. Having said that, there are edge cases, because certainly for application papers, many of us use commercial tools, which I think is perfectly fine. I think the real question is, do you want what you're publishing to be used by other people? And you want other people to be built upon your work? If you want that to happen, then you have to include your code and data, especially if you're writing custom code or novel code, you need to make that available. And I will say that from the point of view of JChem-Inf, if you don't do that, we will send that paper back to you, and we're just then spending time unnecessarily before we can think about sending it for review. So certainly for JChem-Inf, if you are planning to submit, make sure it includes the code and data right up front.
I'll totally second what Rajarshi said, and he was certainly very unbiased, because most of his career he focused on developing tools that help people share data and software and programs. So that was a very objective opinion. But I totally agree. In today's world, that's critical. Data sharing is promoted by journals. NIH in the US just published a new policy mandating NIH-funded researchers to follow the data sharing and management. That's another very important topic, how you manage your data, but that's separate. Essentially, it's impossible to reproduce somebody else's work, even computational, if you don't have access to their data. So that's the primary rule of publishing, right? Experts in the field should be able to reproduce what you publish.
And just to add to this, even prior to publishing, you want to make sure that people in your lab at least can find your workflows and scripts and all that. And that's not a given. In most cases, you have to dig deeply to find that code and data. So make sure in your close environment, people follow those guidelines. And documentation is also key.
I'll also point out simply, I mean, yes, in principle, if good science requires reproducibility, et cetera, but there's an even more sort of simpler, more selfish reason to put it out there, put your code and data out there. And that is, if you make it easy for people to play with your work or build on your work, you're going to get citations, and you're going to see more and more attention paid to your work. I can say from experience, when papers make it difficult to try the thing out, even if it's a cool method, I shut that paper down and just move on through my day. And I guess other people will do that, and you basically lose attention. So if you want the people to be interested in what you're doing, you need to make it easy for them to actually work with what you produced.
There is a caveat with IP, obviously, and you just have to address this first. But after the data is appropriately protected, I would advise young people not to worry about losing their name recognition by sharing. I think it's the other way around.
So also, I would like to add that as you can hear the audience to see, the journals are putting a lot of effort to really document the code and make sure that the code is really well presented and it really works. Now, put yourself as a user. When you're using a free code or a free program, just don't use the program as is. Always check the publications, check how the algorithm was developed. And even if you are not an expert, just have a sense of the usefulness and also of the limitations so that you can interpret the outcome of that program, of that algorithm. Otherwise, just free code can be made accessible on the web. But if we don't have a proper documentation, we can use that tool, as Karina was saying, just by fashion, just by pushing buttons, get a result and get numbers. So check the documentation, check the original publication of the software.
Well, I think should add that having this information available gives transparency to the paper. Like, you know what is going on, and online with what Jose was saying, if it is well documented, it's more transparent. If it is not well documented, it's almost as not having anything available, because you can get lost very easily.
It's true. Someone would like to add some more about it? No. Well, I think we have enough time for a last topic. That I think it will be the last, and you can give us a short opinion or comment about that. And the topic is publishing and dissemination. Beyond peer review, I mean, social media, preprints. What's your opinion, comments, or advice about it for our youngest audience? So if you let me, can we start with Dr. Alex Tropsha?
I actually think Rajarshi would be best to answer, because he's been extremely active in this media. My short comment: do it appropriately. Don't self-glorify, but distribute the knowledge any way you can. But I'll turn it to Rajarshi.
I'm not sure whether I should take that. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Maybe I'm spending too much time on Twitter. But I agree. In many cases, and I think I suffered from this when I started out, that I hesitated to sort of advertise myself, thinking it was like boasting. If you do it appropriately, it's not boasting. It's just spreading the word of what you've done. And if it's interesting, people will pay attention to it. If not, you try again later. But there are many venues for doing this. I mean, obviously, Twitter is there. Now people are moving to Mastodon and other places. And so basically, I mean, use the venues that you have access to spread the word, and then see what happens. I think related to that is that it works better when you have a presence on those venues already. So for example, if you don't have a Twitter account today and you post your latest publication tomorrow, it might be difficult to get a lot of attention. But if you sort of work on it over time and build up a network of people, that the network effects will help in spreading the word about your work. And so that's one thing to keep in mind.
Zdrazil?
Well, I just wanted to add that, for instance, Twitter or any other social media channel is also a good source of getting information about what others have published, right? And so it's like, if you already have kind of a network, then it's like it puts a filter on what comes to you. Of course, that's a little bit biased, but also it can save you a lot of time. So you get a lot of information about jobs that are open, conferences that you might want to attend, new papers. So it's a really good source of information as well. So even if you're shy, like posting your own work or even expressing your opinion, you don't have to. You can also be like a little bit just an observer. But of course, you have to slowly build up a network. So if you have no followers, of course, then what you will get in isn't really very useful, probably. But that builds up over time. And you start out as an observer anyways. But I really found this in the beginning, or even now, for me, this is more a source of information than actually publicizing myself so much. It's more really a very good source of information.
Sure. Dr. Martinez?
Yeah, so I guess I'm more on the side of observant at some point, because for me it's hard to really reach those places for social media and such for these purposes. However, I noticed that is quite important. For example, for this very meeting, we actually use social media for reaching people out and see who is there. So I definitely think it's useful and we should use it. But yeah, it's something that we need to do. Like, sorry, I have some noise over here. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'd like to, excuse me, have you want to add more or?
Go ahead, José.
Yeah, we're just gonna comment on the preprints. I think now are coming more and more popular, so to speak, because it's a kind of fast way to start disseminating your job, your work or your study. And also, if you post your preprint on social media, you can get comments from the public, can either give you some additional hints to improve your work, can give you preliminary feedback before or at the same time your work is going to peer review. And preprints are also extremely useful to get your work immediately available to the community. So I'd just like to comment, so kind of the combination of preprints and social media. By the way, that as Alex was saying, the preprints are also kind of a workaround for the APCs when you still need to struggle for some funding. So preprints are a very good, excellent option to work around that.
Someone would like to add something else? Do you have any other topic that you would like to comment?
Yeah, actually, I just had some question from a person that what about appealing to a comment from the editors? So what do you think?
I mean, I think it's quite reasonable to appeal a decision. I mean, it's possible that the editor did not make it clear why that decision was made. And so I can speak for myself. I have received emails where people have appealed decisions, and then I try to explain in more detail why, if it wasn't clear. In many cases, it doesn't change the outcome, but it's certainly worth sending that email.
I think it's a very important, good question, because doing and living science is essentially argue. We argue for or against all the time as part of the scientific inquiry. So I think I would encourage people to argue, but you have to have very specific, very detailed arguments and very strong. And I would advise run these arguments by a colleague, by a ideally distinguished colleague, and ask for help. People make mistakes, editors make mistakes, reviewers may make mistakes. So it's not uncommon when the paper is reviewed in some either biased way or without scientific rigor, sufficient rigor on the part of the reviewer. So if you disagree with the decision, go for it. But again, you have to be extremely convincing.
Yeah, actually, this comment comes from a person that is editor in other journal in chemical sciences, and he mentioned to me that he noticed that people from, let's say, Latin cultures are not tempted to argue or appeal. So I was saying maybe it's cultural that we are not very much like open for sort of defending the point. So I would say that in general, as Alex said, if there is a good point to defend, go ahead. There is nothing wrong with it. It's not bad. It's not seen like a bad thing from the editors. However, if it is not defendable, it might be much more work for the editors without reason. So, but it is good. I would say it's okay to appeal in some cases. I don't know.
Yeah, just kind of add a bit more from a practical point of view. When you have let's say a rejection email, don't appeal immediately, because there is a lot of emotions right there. So that's a feel of frustration. And when you reply immediately, as Alex was saying, usually you don't provide good reasons. So practical suggestion, calm down, wait at least 1 or 2 days. And as just basically Alex was saying, check with someone else and with a very calm way, put forward specific reasons, not just because you are frustrated or you are in anger.
Point.
Yeah, and I'd say avoid to be personal in any way. Totally avoid making any assumptions as to why this paper was rejected. Just focus on the content and very specific. If reviewers ascribe to you something you did not say, bring it up. Be very, very factual, not opinionate.
Do you have any other topic that you would like to bring to this roundtable?
I think Abraham has raised a hand.
Yes, thanks, Karina. I just want to know your opinion, as editors, about the predatory journals that have high impact factors. What about those journals? Are those good for publish or are not accessible? What do you think about it?
Avoid. There is a long list of predatory journals. Just ignore. The only thing you could not find them, you could not eliminate them. You could ignore them, and you should ignore them. If your research is good, you don't need to go there.
But how to ignore them when they have so high impact factors?
It's actually inflated. Oftentimes what they do is that they claim an association with a major publisher and in large font would put the impact factor of journals in a particular field, and a tiny font their own impact factor of 0.9. So
that's good to know.
Yeah, I second that. It's just say no.
let's say Nobel Prize winners don't publish there.
It's great advice. I don't know if we have questions on YouTube or. Some experiences. I guess we don't.
I think it was a question about useful links for beginners.
No, sure. I think you provided a couple of those. If you have more.
No, but that's not what I provided. Was sort of a funny comment. The Kardashian index. I don't think there are actually like complete books online, ebooks, that would comprehensively discuss cheminformatics, but I just don't know. I think it's attending symposia like this. That's a good way to start. But I don't know if my colleagues know of educational links, strong, informative educational links on the web. That could be.
I mean, I remember there was. I remember there is, I think, a Nature blog. I can't remember if it's a blog post, an article that is a very nice description of how to construct an abstract that is useful. Just see if I can pull that up. I can't seem to find it now.
Yeah, so I think also we have the opportunity to post some of those links and information on the website when we finish. So even if we have information that developed for later, we can put it there as well. But yeah.
I just sent one link, but it's an image. I can't seem to find the original blog post.
But I mean, to elaborate on this again, I think if you want to learn how to write a paper, on one hand, you have to accept your own limitations. I think we just all have different talents, and there are people who just naturally like writing and write better than others, but you can still learn it. And I think it's useful to just write. I mean, even authors, like people who write books, say that it's the practice of writing which gives you the skill. But then also reading lots of articles, as I've said before, but also if you like to act as a reviewer, right? Like starting from your postdoc stage, you could also be a reviewer for journals, and this will give you a lot of experience too, and you will learn what is a good paper, what is a bad paper. So in the end, it's improving your skills by writing, reading, and reviewing papers. But also maybe, a bit accepting your limitations. So I have heard about people who said, okay, I'm not into writing, so I can't have a career in academia. I rather collaborate and be a co-author. But if you're not into writing, I think a career in academia is a bit difficult. That's maybe something one has to accept at some point. But you can learn. I don't want to end on a negative note, so I think you can always improve.
I just would like, okay, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'd like to briefly add to the previous point concerning what you should avoid in a paper. I would say that especially in multidisciplinary papers, don't use computational methods just for the sake of adding a computational tool, just for adding a nice figure or an elaborated algorithm. Just pay attention to the main goal of the paper and see if the computational approach is really making a key contribution to the goal of your paper. So basically, don't decorate your paper with a informatics calculation.
Dr. Guha, you would like to say something else?
I know it slipped my mind. Just to follow on from what Barbara said, and I want to second that. And I think really it's about just reading papers, publications that are out there. And if you read enough, you can start differentiating between what is good, what is bad. And if you emulate that, it's just a matter of keeping at it. And I think the key thing to remember, these don't have to be works of art. Your point is to present a result and a justification for that result. So it can still be simple language as long as it's clear, precise, and says what you want it to say. And it really is just a matter of practice.
One more question. What do you think is the best time to start as a reviewer?
I think I mentioned this just now. I think you can start to be a reviewer in your postdoc. We sometimes do that, or quite often actually, to be honest. And sometimes even we invite PhD students if the supervisor would help with that review process, right? But I think really as a postdoc, that's the best phase where you have time still, but are experienced enough to be able to review a paper. Because what we are observing, the more senior the people are that we ask to be a reviewer, the less likely it will be they accept our invitations. Of course, they would be very good reviewers, but often they just don't have the time. So I think postdoctoral researchers are really often excellent reviewers because they take the time to read the paper carefully. And as I just said, I think it can also help you to learn what a good or a bad paper looks like by reviewing other papers, because you critically read it and give your opinion, and not just read it for gaining information, but have a say in what you think could be improved.
Yeah, well, I think, yes, it is a very good way to get involved. So it's excellent for people to really want to become a reviewer. And yeah, postdoctoral fellows are the best. And you can even tell when you have, as an author, you can tell if that was reviewed by a postdoc or PhD student rather than a senior person, because it's going to be more detailed. So it is sometimes hard to find reviewers because sometimes the postdoctoral people does not have the email address available. So if you want to play that role, you just can put it on your social media and LinkedIn or in your web page. Make sure that you have your contact information available to be reached.
That's a good point, because sometimes when you reach a postdoc, you probably haven't been a corresponding author from a paper, so your information is not available for editors. So that's a good advice.
Yeah. Also, I would like to comment, also backing up a comment here in one of the attendees, Dr. Lenin Dominguez, his comments on the Q&A, start as a PhD. I would say that that's a very good start. Even if you have a chance to formally write a review, or even during your PhD studies, well, by the time you have read a lot of papers, and when you're reading a paper, I think you should look at the paper both ways. First, get the information, but also get what is missing in that paper. And while discussing with the students and seminars, it's common that the students already picked things that are missing or are not perfectly clear or that can be improved. And those points are already discussed, let's say, in a seminar. I think those type of comments, those type of perceptions that the PhD students, or even before, already have, is a very good training, because after that, what you need to do is just write it down. But I could say, like, since the PhD, also read the papers critically in a good sense, like positive criticism to the other people's work, or even your own work. That's my comment.
Well, I think there is no more questions from the audience. So if you would like to thank all of you for being here, for being part of this roundtable. Great comments, great answers, and great advices for young people.